Live and online, it's Sleepless with Steve and the Movie Book Club with your host, Steve Pulaski.
We're live on YouTube on this Wednesday evening, second show of 2024. One of our biggest shows of the year, one of my top 3 favorite shows of the year. I don't know how to quantify it because all 3 of these shows mean so much to me, but this is one of the shows that I always look forward to doing. It is our top 5 worst movies of 2023, and I had enough to fill a list this year. It's like last year. I had enough to fill a list. I think 2 years ago, I was kind of struggling. I was like, man, it's hard to get to 10 for this one, but no, I didn't have any struggle making this list at all whatsoever. Super excited to share my list. Super excited to hear your guys' list as well. We're going to be each going through our top 5 or bottom 5, however you want to look at it, worst movies of 2023. But in the meantime, we're reeling over here in the Midwest from a big snowstorm that happened yesterday. A very good one over here. I live in eastern Iowa, and 4th heaviest single-day snowfall in the history of my town at 12.6 inches in a 22-hour span. If it's going to snow, it might as well snow big. And that's what it did. I woke up. It started Tuesday night. I woke up Wednesday morning and they said 6 inches had fallen. They said about 6 overnight had fallen. And then it was one of those storms that just seemed to get worse. Like by like 11:30, 12, it just got worse. Like it just seemed like it was windy. So it was whiteout conditions. There was actually a tow ban out here for multiple counties. So if you got stuck, you were screwed until this morning. And I mean, I've mentioned this on the show before. I live in an extremely hilly, ridgy, cliffy area. So it is downright fucking terrifying to drive out here in the snow. It's not like back home where it's scary to drive in the snow everywhere. But back home by you guys, though, you take for granted those flat roads. These hills out here make this shit 10 times worse for everybody. Plows, cars, trucks, everybody. The city's good about clearing the roads for the most part. I mean, with stuff like this, though, you just can't keep up with it. But they are pretty good with clearing the roads. But, man, those hills make it dangerous out here. Really some frightening driving out here, especially in normal conditions sometimes, at night even, but even worse when it snows the way it did. But it's good to see you, gentlemen. Any commentary on the snow? Anything you guys like to share? Joe, I know you drove in it.
I'll just say, note to self, don't visit Steve during the winter. Definitely make a note of that. Yeah, I drove in it yesterday. So I went to work yesterday for a meeting. And then around like noon, I noticed how bad it was coming down, but it wasn't accumulating. And then like 2 o'clock out here, it started like sticking to like, everything. And like I went to my boss and I was like, hey, is it okay if I work from home the rest of the day? And they're like, yeah, go ahead. So I packed up my laptop, got in my car by 2:30. It took me from 2:30 until 4 p.m. to get home because of how bad the roads were. And my normal commute, usually without any traffic, will take me about 30 minutes. So it was an hour addition of commute time because of how bad it was.
Wow.
I had to take
and you're not even fighting rush hour.
No,
Even, imagine if you left at 4.
Yeah, and that's what I was telling everybody today at work too. I was like, now imagine if I would have stayed. I would have gone home like at fucking like 8 o'clock at night.
It's no joke, man. It really isn't. Dom, did you have to drive in it?
Thankfully, no. I am off for the week.
Oh, good for you.
Good for you, man.
From work, and we
I'm off Friday.
I know
and I'm
next.
happy for
Have you
that.
guys looked at the? Say again.
I'm off Friday, and I'm happy about that because we're getting another storm out here on Friday.
Yeah. It's fine. For Chelsea, she's got a limp because her leg got messed up at work, so she had to get an MRI, and apparently some dude rear-ended her and her dad.
Oh shit.
Because of the snow. So thankfully it was just a fender bender, but yeah, no, it sucks. And I wanted to do stuff later this week, like to make use of my time off, but I think we'll see. I might hermit. I think the snow is gonna cool or like lighten up, but next week, have you guys looked at the weather? I know I'm going to make this brutal. A boring weather podcast, but it's going to be like literally sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah, Sunday's gonna be -9.
Yep.
I saw Tuesday morning out here in eastern Iowa. It's going to be negative 35 wind chill.
Hell yeah.
Super stoked to go to work that morning. Super
Hell
stoked to
yeah.
wake up at 5:30 that day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's gonna be rough. I was gonna say Catherine would sympathize emphatically with Chelsea over here too, because it took her over an hour to get home yesterday, and she got stuck several times too. So it was
Nice. Oh,
very fortuitous that she got home safely. No, I mean this is the season for it though. I feel what I kept saying to people. This was the punishment for it being 50 degrees on Christmas. This is the punishment right here. It was like a whole season's worth of winter right here this week. Because I think by the end of this week, at least in my area, we'll top out at over 20 inches for the season already.
yeah.
In the matter of a week, So, but we got a big show today. We got a big show to tackle today. The order again for how we give our picks. It's me, Dom, and then Joe. Is that correct? That's what I thought. Okay. Been doing this for like 3 years. You think I would remember the order right now? But that's how we'll do it. We each built our slideshows. Joe, doing a remarkable job, not only doing the show, also having a snack because he knows it's going to be a long one, also manning the controls for the slideshow, and also repping your boy. I like that t-shirt. So we've got a lot going on this show today. We're each going to give our 5 worst movies of 2023. So it'll go me first, then Dom, then Joe's picks. We'll loop back around, probably take 2 Zoom-sponsored intermissions. So with that, I ask you, Joe, are you ready for this undertaking? You are all good to go, brother. All right, so we're going to start off with me. My number 5 worst film of 2023 is Bird Box Barcelona. A sequel so irrelevant, I don't know of anybody else besides me and my girlfriend who actually watched it, let alone sat through the whole damn thing, let alone still remembers it even came out this year. This reminds me, and Joe, I know you'll get this. This reminded me a lot of Jigsaw, which is not good, which is not very good at all.
It's not a good movie to compare it to at all.
It reminded me of Jigsaw because it feels like and by Jigsaw was what, the 8th sequel, or the 8th installment of the Saw series. So by that point, we've been used to like kind of a roller coaster of sequels of varying quality. This is technically the first spin-off of Bird Box, the Sandra Bullock movie on Netflix, which was wildly popular and was kind of a cultural touchstone hard to believe about 5 years ago, because it came out at the end of, if you remember, it came out the end of 2018, and then it was popular going into 2019, like January and February. Speaking of weather too, I always remember the good meme because that was the time when we had like negative 45, 50 degree wind chills in Chicago. Yeah. So everybody was using the Sandra Bullock meme, if you go outside, you will die. I always remember that. But Bird Box Barcelona had no cultural impact, has nothing to hang its hat on as a sequel, spinoff, whatever the hell you're calling it. Apparently, it's the first of several spinoffs planned, because basically how Netflix wants to do this is they want to tackle different countries. So we could be seeing Bird Box Australia, Bird Box Germany very soon, and there's nothing inherently wrong with that concept. It's actually kind of interesting on the surface of like, looking at how these different pockets of the world react to this alien invasion where you cannot look at the monster or you will then become infected. And it's an interesting concept, especially with the litany of sequels they have planned for this thing. But it's worse when this movie takes everything the original Bird Box did and just renders it lousy and forgettable. Mm-hmm. And I swear I hadn't thought much about this movie until I was compiling this list, because the movie stars Mario Casas, and it takes place in Barcelona, and it's basically him and his daughter trying to navigate this world. It is terribly unengaging. It doesn't benefit from being also to the latest thriller that, of course, main contribution in the thematic realm is fucking grief either, which doesn't help its case. It's already a boring movie, and then you tack on a tired trauma grief angle with this thing, and it feels even worse. There's a few other characters in this movie too, but most of them die before having a chance to get developed, so they're not even really worth mentioning, therefore. And I really think too, I mean, besides like the grayscale visuals of this thing, the ugly look of it, and also being titled like one of Netflix's shitty reality TV shows that goes global as well, the thing that's missing from this movie is an anchor. Mario Casas doesn't have a ton to work with as a character, and he's also not a very engaging lead. Whereas you're reminded with Bird Box, at least I was. I didn't get a chance to go back and rewatch the first movie before watching this one, but I was reminded about how much of Bird Box felt legitimate and felt real because of Sandra Bullock's anchoring performance in that movie, which was equal parts like heroic and devastating. And it's also what I also realized too. I do get A Quiet Place and Bird Box confused because they both came out within like 8 months of one another back in 2018. But A Quiet Place Part Two retained its cast and Krasinski's direction, so it at least had something going for it as a sequel. This thing has absolutely nothing going for it. Bird
Wow.
Box Barcelona is my number 5 for worst film of 2023.
I got nothing to add. I don't think we have anything to add. Did you watch it, Joe?
No, I'm the one that told him about it though, and I feel kind of guilty. I was like, "Hey,
Well,
this
you know
came
how
out."
bad and it reminds me too, because you know how bad that was that I remember, Joe, you said you were thinking about watching it,
Yeah.
and then I watched it before you, and then you saw my rating on Letterboxd. I gave it 1.5 out of 5, and you're like, yeah, I'm not gonna watch it. This thing also, I don't know if you remember this, Dom, because I think I put it on the schedule too far out. This thing I thought was so fucking bad and irrelevant to talk about too. I took it off the Sleepless schedule pretty quietly.
Yeah, you did. I remember, like, because we were supposed to watch it, and then like I checked the Google Doc, and it was gone. I was like, oh my god, what a fucking hero.
It was like it's like the movie The Unbreakable Boy that was supposed to come out in March of 2022. It got taken off the schedule. I still have no idea about that movie. There's still no news about that movie. I'm probably the only one who, besides anybody who was in it, who still gives a shit. But I took that thing off the schedule, and I got no plans of putting it back. So it did get a little time on this show, though. It's my number 5 worst film of the year.
That's really funny.
Ugh.
Oh
We
boy.
can
Well,
bounce
that doesn't
ahead
make
to-
an appearance on my list because I didn't even watch it. So we're just gonna move on to my number 5. All right, Joe, you ready?
Yes, as you can tell, it's like I'm watching Blade Runner, and it's just a big red screen on my face right now. Go ahead, Dom.
I mean, I wish Ana de Armas would come out of the walls and touch me. But anyway, okay, you ready, Joe?
Yeah, go ahead.
My number 5 worst bottom of the year is The Creator. It is a movie that existed, and it's got a lot of lofty themes and a lot of striking imagery. If you've never seen like online like concept art for just ideas before, it's kind of a mess of an auteur's vision. uh a lot of lofty things, but didn't quite stick the landing in most any department. It kind of got the strongest thing about this film, and it's on my number 5, and it's at a distant 5 to everything else. Let me say that, because I do have some respect to the movie, like with the themes about imperialism and all that stuff, oppressed peoples, et cetera, military industrial complex by America and the West and all that stuff. Like, okay, those are some pretty cool themes, but god damn, how simplified do you want to make this stuff? Because it has got absolutely no nuance whatsoever, and you're falling back on all of these lame ass tropes, and all you really have left is to fall back on is John David Washington and robots. That's really all you've got. Did I say his name right?
Yeah.
John
Yes.
David Washington. Okay, I don't know why I thought
Yep.
two different names, or rather, like a completely separate set of names. But yes, again, the strongest part of this movie was the vibes, and then Washington did a pretty decent job given the really lackluster script that he had to work with. So if it looks like I'm making fun of him specifically in the slides, I didn't. I just thought it was really funny because I was like watching Tropic Thunder clips the other day. I'm like, oh my god, why? What if it would be really funny if I did The Creator? Anyway, so yeah, it's just a really weak movie for something I was really hoping could pull through, and I'd say it's one of the worst. It's my bottom 5 worst bottoms 5 of the year, but it's more so disappointing. Let me say that. I give it a little leeway.
Yeah, that's a disappointment movie for sure. The thing that struck me the most about that movie and why I found myself really, I had to almost kind of let it marinate after I saw it because the thing that I fell in love with about that movie, and I think a lot of people did, and what it will be remembered for is the visuals and the fact
Yes.
that that movie cost less than $100 million to make. This thing came out in a year in 2023 when you had the $300 million Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and you
Mm.
had the $200 million Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and both those movies look measurably worse in terms of visual effects than the creator did. And the when you have these movies, I always remember David Ehrlich even said too. He's like, when you have these movies that have like these comparatively medium budgets that don't need to make like the box office haul that's equivalent of the GDP of a small country in order to please shareholders, you can actually get a movie with a pretty solid vision, at least from a visual standpoint. The thing I agree with you though with this thing is like the thing that really makes it fall apart though, I also believe, is that it doesn't really know how it feels about AI, which is at the core of the movie. It doesn't
Yeah.
really know what it wants us to take away from it. It's wishy-washy. There's two scenes in particular, we don't have enough time to get into them, but there's two scenes in particular that are like almost contradictory for what it wants you to take away from the AI angle of this thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's a very interesting passion project, but like most passion projects, I think it was like overbaked by the time it came out and simultaneously underbaked.
Yep.
Did you see it, Joe?
I did, yeah. No, I basically feel the same way you guys did about it. I think I was like, wasn't here for the review. I was gone. I was in Austin, Texas when you guys reviewed it. But I remember watching the review live, and I think both you guys gave it 2 stars. And like, if I was on the show, I probably would have given it the highest, because around that time I was kind of feeling 2.5. I was just kind of like, I didn't necessarily like dislike it too much or like it that much. That it was just kind of in the middle. But yeah, the visual effects were like the thing that made me go, okay, this is really impressive to look at the very least. I really enjoyed that.
I name dropped Neil Blomkamp,
Blomkamp.
during
Blomkamp.
that review, if I remember.
Yeah.
And
With like District 9.
Because it felt like his movie.
it did feel like a lot like his movie. And if Neil Blomkamp just didn't exist and this came out, this would feel like a revelation VFX wise. But we're a decade since
District 9.
District 9
Yeah.
and his other works and stuff. So it's like, yeah, it's not, it's still good. It still feels, I don't know about fresh, but it still feels good.
Yeah.
But the bar has been raised. And again, it comes back to the writing and the story and that structure.
That's the weakest part.
This
of
is
the
a
movie.
wonderful case study in like how you can make a really beautiful piece of art that doesn't really say all that much, or it's very wishy-washy, as Steve was saying, and doesn't really declare all too much other than imperialism bad, which is I agree with, but we've been that way for a couple decades, bro. I think we got it.
Yeah, mainly what I liked about the movie was the visuals. I thought John David Washington was good. I think the action, like that goes hand in hand with the visuals, but the action was just brutal. Like one of the things that always sticks out to me is the robot that's basically a bomb, like a bomb from Mario Bros. That is just sent in there to blow up. I'm like,
then you have to like agree with them first. I'm like, no one thought that. Okay, whatever.
Like, yeah, those were like the 3 things I mainly enjoyed about the movie. It got me by it, but it's such a predictable movie from beginning to end, though, for sure.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, you good, Dom?
I'm good.
All right, cool. Moving on to my worst of 2023 list. My number 5 is Five Nights at Frederick's, man. Directed by Emma Tammy. Available on Peacock. But you're probably better off spending your $5 on playing the first game like Dom and I did the night we reviewed this movie. This wasn't necessarily awful, but looking back on it, I kind of wish I gave it a lower rating.
Is it safe to say that our number 5 spots are generally farther from like the rest of
No. That's like my honorable mention area when we get to it.
Okay,
later.
got it.
That's definitely.
I go to 10, so this is the cream of the crop.
What was I gonna say? Like this being number 5, like it feels perfect in this place because I look back on the review. I'm like, I gave it 2 stars. I really should have gave it 1.5. Like it's just like I look back on it. I think about this movie and I'm like, this movie really wasn't all that good. Uh, I liked seeing Josh Hutcherson. I thought he did a good job in what they did with Mike the security guard as a character for the most part until they got to like the second half of this movie where they kind of deal with like this whole flashback sequence involving his little brother. I think Matthew Lillard is completely wasted here as the career counsel guy. And if you've seen the movie, the twists that his character is, damn, we are taking a long time if we're already hitting the timer right now. We're on number 5. The twist they do with Matthew Lillard's character, it's kind of like, oh, really? You're going to crowbar this into the movie from the games as well? It really felt like, let's just take pieces of the game and make the ultimate fan film. Because that's all it really felt like. The audience I saw with, as much fun as I had watching them cosplay as these characters from the video games and just the different monsters that we didn't even see in this movie, as fun as that was, and listening to the reaction, like gleeing for it, I totally get why they loved it. I just didn't. I'm only a fan really of the first 2 games. Everything else past that, I've kept up with it with Matt Pat, the game theory guy who makes a cameo in the movie as well. Salute to him because now he is retiring from YouTube. I kept up with it because of him, but like, in all honesty, I should have known this was never gonna work as a movie. Like, just the idea of going back to this pizzeria all 5 nights after learning what's going on in there and learning what's happening. Like, come on, man. Like, it just left the realm of plausibility, and the fact they played it so straight and serious the entire time. Normally, that might actually enhance something. It did not work out here. By far the worst thing is the character they decided to add in from the most recent game, which is Vanessa, who I think the actress is fine, but she has some of the worst lines of dialogue in this movie. She speaks, she does the thing that I hate when they do with these kind of characters. She speaks in fucking fortune cookies, which is like a cliche that I just hate with characters, where they're like, well, sometimes you don't know what you got till it's gone. Like, you know, just saying shit like that throughout the whole movie to Josh Hutcherson, and it's just like, oh, you haven't met them yet? They're kind of particularly strange, and they're very fond of children, like speaking in riddles and secrets, until the end of the movie where they're like, I've been trying to tell you the whole time, and you didn't listen to me. It's like, no, you didn't. And like, shut up. Again, Josh Hutcherson's like one of my favorite young actors. I loved watching him grow up. Bridget Terabithia, loved his performances in The Hunger Games and so many other movies as well. The George Clooney one that's directed by Alexander Payne. Oh my god. Oh wait, no, he's not in that. Never mind. I'm thinking of a whole different set of kids.
You must be thinking of Firehouse Dog.
But it was cool to see him again. It's been a while, but it was not enough to save this movie. Number 5, Five Nights at Freddy's.
Didn't include that one on my list, though. I think if I had maybe some emotional attachment to the games, maybe I would have been more offended, or maybe I would have liked it more. I liked how that movie, I saw this, that it was the number 1 lowest rated yet most loved movie on Letterboxd, meaning it was the movie that like had like the lowest rating but the most amount of hearts like given to it. And I thought that was probably pretty fitting for that. I was not a fan of it. I thought it was mediocre, but I did find it a little bit interesting too. All around though. We'll jump in. I'll give my 4th before we take our intermission. That sound okay?
Sounds good to me.
All right, you ready?
Go.
Perfect. My number 4 worst film of 2023 is White Men Can't Jump. It is the remake of the Ron Shelton movie from the early 90s. Now, Ron Shelton's White Men Can't Jump, I want to go on my soapbox here for just a second. That is one of, if not the best basketball movies I've ever seen.
100%.
Absolutely love that movie. If you don't know it, it's basically the story of a white former college basketball star played by Woody Harrelson who travels across the country with his girlfriend played by Rosie Perez. And what they do is they hustle pickup ball players in order to pay off gambling debts. And he uses... And again, he's white, Billy, played by Woody Harrelson. He uses black players' stereotypes of white players to his favor, and that's how he hustles them because he's a very talented basketball player. And he partners up with Wesley Snipes as Sydney, and they think they found a way to make this like fast money. Where Ron Shelton's classic basketball movie was rugged and felt lived in and was very funny and very topical. Cal Maddock, the director of White Men Can't Jump, his movie is pretty and soft. And those are two things you don't want to be in basketball. And that's exactly what this movie is. It is not the funny thing is, it's not the only subpar remake from Calmatic this year. He was also behind the House Party remake a year ago in January. Now, that movie wasn't good, but that movie was at least somewhat entertaining. And let's be honest, it's remaking a fun comedy with Kid and Play. It's remaking a fun, lighthearted 90s comedy. This thing actually is remaking a movie that was pretty spot on in its racial stereotypes and racially tinged sort of commentary, while also being a very funny movie. But the director of Lil Nas X's award-winning Old Town Road music video does no favors with this thing at all. There's no energy in this movie. The two leads, Cinqua Walls and Jack Harlow, this is also the acting debut of rapper Jack Harlow. Harlow's not bad in it. He really isn't. He's got sort of this laconic, laid-back coolness to him that's all right. But these characters are also, too, they just do not have much flavor. The movie looks like a rap music video. It looks pretty, but it's also very hollow. The basketball scenes completely suck. They're very rudimentary. They're almost as bad as another movie on my list, which is a bottom 5 one, is the movie Sweetwater. The basketball scenes are almost as bad as they are in Sweetwater in this thing, too. And what it all boils down to is this is an irrelevant remake to its very core. It doesn't have any sort of reason to exist. It doesn't offer anything or even put like sort of a mindful contemporary commentary on what it means to be a white basketball player, or what it means to carry the burden of like washing out of your favorite sport or something like that, never being able to make it big, because Jack Harlow deals with knee injuries in the movie as well. Highly recommend the Ron Shelton movie from the early 90s. Absolutely great movie. There's probably no better of director of sports dramas than Ron Shelton, too. He made Tin Cup with Kevin Costner. He made Bull Durham with Kevin Costner. He's done quite a few sports movies. White Men Can't Jump might be the crowning achievement of his career, but this thing just completely is listless and feels like a rap video in a lot of ways too, where it's very pretty to look at, but it's got no commentary in it whatsoever. So White Men Can't Jump, it's on Hulu. Don't watch it. Watch the original. That's my number 4 for worst film of 2023. Did you bother to watch it, Joe?
You'll see.
Indeed. That's all we need to know. Dom, I know you're not big on sports, but I know you've been impressed by a few sports movies that we have watched over the last
I can dig a good
years.
sports movie, and that's been one I've been meaning to watch.
Hey,
anyway.
he loved Air.
White Men Can't Jump is hilarious.
Yeah.
It's a hilarious movie.
Air was number 5 on his list, so we know Dom likes basketball.
Oh yeah.
There was so much basketball in the movie.
If it's got some edges on it, I like it.
Yeah, it's a very edgy 90s comedy drama. Woody Harrelson gives an extremely good performance. And I'll just use these last fleeting minutes or so before we cut to our first of probably multiple Zoom-sponsored intermissions to just throw in and add to that Woody Harrelson was also in a very good basketball movie this year. It didn't make my list. It's a good movie, though. It's called Champions, where he becomes the head coach of a Special Olympics basketball team. That was a very impressively funny movie. Set in Iowa, too, I will say, too. Give Iowa a little bit of love as well. So we will come back here in about 60 to 90 seconds after our Zoom-sponsored intermission. These guys got to give their number 4 picks for worst films of 2023, and we got to continue on with our list and what is one of my favorite shows of the year. Don't go anywhere. We got more of the worst of 2023 when Sleepless with Steve returns. Back and better than ever, Sleepless with Steve. After our Zoom-sponsored intermission, we are giving our worst films of 2023. Just gave my number 4 pick, White Men Can't Jump, the remake of the Ron Shelton classic, directed by Calmatic. I do love saying that name. He's the award-winning director of the Lil Nas X music video, Old Town Road. Also directed the House Party remake with LeBron James, of all people, in that movie as well. That was under LeBron's I can't remember the name. Spring Green. No, that's a lawn care company. Spring Hill production company. There, I knew it was going to come to me. At any rate, though, Dom, I don't want to delay you, my friend. Your number 4 worst film of 2023.
My number 4 is The Exorcist Believer, directed by David Gordon Green. I'm not a horror guy. I'm not really good at the whole arsenal, the pantheon of horror greats. But looking at Green's filmography specifically, is he a hit or miss? I actually tossed that out to you, gentlemen. Do you think he's a hit or miss director?
I think for the most part, he's a hit. I know some people might disagree because of the recent Halloween trilogy, but like even outside the Halloween trilogy, there are movies of his that I've enjoyed.
Okay.
I say his hit rate here is pretty enviable.
Yeah.
I would say I think he's kind of like a 1B Richard Linklater in some ways because of the fact
That's
that
a good comparison.
He takes on a lot of different style movies. He's done comedies, he's done horror films, he's done dramas, he's done biographies. He's got range. He's got incredible range. He had a downward turn in the late 2000s where he made a lot of crappy stoner comedies like The Sitter and Your Highness. But other than that, he has made some really good movies, including one I like to mention too, Stronger, with Jake Gyllenhaal about the survivor of the Boston Marathon bombing.
Wow.
With that in mind.
And usually those kinds of directors, I'm like they're a surefire hit to at least deliver something good. But something about Exorcist Believer really did not sit well with me, despite it having. And it's funny because it's like as it wore on, I thought it would. I found myself buying into it a little more because it laid some decent groundwork in the first third and even in the middle a little bit. But as it was all supposed to pay off, and with the inclusion of the legacy character, it really just started to feel flat to the point where you're trying to do all of these things. And now I understand you're trying to recapture the magic here because this is a Lega sequel, but unfortunately you're just trying too hard. And all these cool things that you're doing, which could have been cool in a different context, really just do not it just does not come together. And ultimately it is a mess of a movie because this one, looking at it now, I'm like, this is actually kind of more disappointing than it is making me more rage filled at how poorly put together it was. I guess the thing that really makes me upset is what they did to poor old what's her name? Jesus Christ.
Ellen Burstyn.
Yeah. It's like, my God. So they effectively like completely disable her eyesight in this movie for absolutely no goddamn reason other than to just hurt her and raise the stakes in a very cheap way, which is fine. I'm okay with killing off these legacy, whatever, because she was kind of hobbling along. I hate to say, at least how she was directed in this movie. But it just really comes to nothing, and it's so cheap when they try to tie her back together at the very end. And I don't mean to do like a whole plot breakdown, but ultimately it just does not come together, which sucks because the two kids here who were possessed were doing really damn well, doing their goddamn best to be possessed, and they're pulling overtime here, but ultimately it's I don't know. Gentlemen, do you think I'm being too harsh on it, or would you? Because I'm thinking back to the review. I think we were all in agreement here.
Oh, you're not being too harsh on it. Just you wait.
Okay. I started feeling bad, but like, no.
No, this thing did suck. This thing did
Okay. Okay, good.
really suck.
Suck is even getting to it, man.
And the interesting thing to note, I guess two quick things. The interesting thing to note about The Exorcist Believer is that like now Blumhouse and Universal acquired the rights to make those movies for a whopping $400 million. There's a trilogy planned.
Yeah.
And the movie did pretty well in theaters. It did pretty well. But there's reports now that the next two sequels might go straight to Peacock. They might
Wow.
which would be a huge financial just complete crippling of this series because they overestimated, I think, its appeal. Number two, I reference a good Letterboxd review from a user I cannot remember, but I remember him saying it's like, here's how the meeting for this movie went. Here was the pitch. What if we have not one but two possessed girls? Studio exec, holy fucking shit.
That's some
And
aliens shit right there.
even the name, and I hate, like, I always harp on this, but I feel like horror movies have the most uncreative subtitles that they just continue to
Yeah.
reuse. Every time I
Mhm.
say The Exorcist Believer, I'm just waiting for Imagine Dragons to kick in.
Oh, you bring me up, you bring me up. That's how the movie should have ended. Then I would have fucking just walked out.
Thank you, Joe. And
If the Exorcist reboot was in 2005 or like whatever, or 2010.
I'll say more. I'll say more if it comes up again. That's all I'll say. It's your turn, Joe.
All right, it's gonna come up again. My number 3 is a
Number
movie-
4.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ooh, hold on a minute. Oh shit, jumping way.
We're
ahead
still on
here.
4.
Still on 4. This is gonna be some deja vu. My number 4 is also White Man Can't Jump.
Wow.
It's directed by Calmatic, like Steve said. It's on Hulu, but like Steve recommended, you could watch the original version on Sling TV for free. So definitely go on there and check that out. Yeah, man, I don't know what else to add on to what Steve was saying, because this movie is missing everything that original movie had, and you can just see it in this slide right here. The style this movie had, from the clothing, the dirtiness, like seeing dirt on both these players, the sweat and everything. It's
Yes.
like everything that this movie looked visually, the remake just doesn't have. It's too clean. It's too pretty. The perfect comparison for you nerds out there is like comparing episode 4 of Star Wars, where they're on a desert planet in Tatooine, everything's got dust and grime to it, to the prequel movies where everything's clean and fake looking CGI. This
Wow.
movie, this remake should be like the original. It should be light, it should be fast paced, it should be witty and quick. This movie was a drag to sit through, man. I honestly was just sitting there going, Jesus Christ, when the hell is this movie gonna pick up pace and actually just like get entertaining? It's boring. Like Steve said, the basketball scenes, they're not as entertaining. There's not as much energy. There's not as much smack talk happening compared to the original. There's just really nothing there. The letterbox review I gave of it, I'm trying to find it right now, but I think I said this. I was trying to find it, but I think I could quote it from the top of my head. These guys are such good hustlers that I was hustled out of 2 hours and 15 minutes of my free time to watch their bullshit. Like, I think that's what I said. I do think Harlow is okay at best. I don't think he's that good. And Sonequa Walls, I think he's fine too. But, you know, again, I hate to make comparisons to the original. I would love for it to be its own thing, but it's hard not to draw these comparisons when it's just like, it's sitting right there in front of me, like what you guys are doing and trying to make a remake here. It comes nowhere near Woody Harrelson, which it's one of my favorite Woody Harrelson performances and Wesley Snipes performances together. I think they're so good together on screen. White Man Can't Jump, the remake, at least, yeah, it's missing everything that you see in that original version. And it's really a shame, too, because I was actually kind of excited for an updated version of this story because of how much, you know, basketball has gotten more popular as years have gone on since the 90s, after the Bulls and everything. Now we have, you know, the LeBron era, we have the Golden State Warriors, and just the whole culture it has to social media as well. I was like, damn, you know what? As much as I hate to say it, but maybe a remake would be a good thing for here. And this proved me all fucking wrong. Yeah, so my number 4, White Men Can't Jump.
Well said. Very well said on that one. We'll jump ahead here then to My number 3 worst film of 2023 is Mafia Mama. This thing came and went like nobody's business in theaters.
Holy
The only
shit!
thing that
I forgot this
the
movie
only
came out.
the only thing that made this movie worse for me was I remember I was seriously sick the week this thing came out. It came out the same weekend as Renfield. And I saw all of them, but like I had laryngitis actually. I had like a cold that developed then into laryngitis. It was absolutely miserable. And somehow, like I said, somehow laryngitis was not the worst thing to happen to me that weekend. It was definitely Mafia Mama. Remember when Adam Sandler said the quiet part aloud years ago regarding that many of his movies are just opportunities to vacation in these lavish countries with his friends? It feels like Toni Collette, Monica Bellucci, and Catherine Hardwicke, the director, are all on a vacation with Mafia Mama. This is a dour excuse for a comedy. What has a lot of potential, and I talk about this ad nauseum on Sleepless. You guys have heard me say this numerous times. There's not enough movies made for the middle-aged demographic in America. There's not really a lot of movies targeted towards like adults, like 40 plus. This thing had the potential to be a commentary on middle-aged women searching for like a change of scenery. But what is instead replaced with all the potential this thing could have had is this like trudge through sitcom cliches and poorly written dialogue. It's essentially about a woman named Kristen, played by Toni Collette, who is like struggling with being an empty nester when her son goes to college, and her husband's unfaithful and everything like that. But she learns from Monica Bellucci that her estranged grandfather was assassinated and that she is the heir to the family business, which is a vineyard in Italy, which serves as a front for mob activities. And essentially, then she goes all the way to Italy, and now she is the heir to this mob enterprise. And that's where the movie goes then. It's a lot of really tasteless, stupid culture clash moments about this meek and frail woman, this meek and frail housewife who now has to run the mob, essentially one of the biggest Italian mob organizations. And there's not a lot for this thing to really latch onto that feels human, that feels relatable, and that feels, I guess you would say like memorable even too. Even the other thing that's kind of shocking about this movie too is that for a movie that like is set in Italy, and a lot of the beautiful parts of Italy are shown too, and this woman who has wanted this Italian getaway for years, there's a terrible running gag about how she masturbates to Stanley Tucci's show Searching for Italy. And for all these things, this is the scene that really took me out of the whole thing. For all that this woman loves Italy, has always wanted to visit it, her Italian heritage, and watches Searching for Italy, Monica Bellucci in one scene has to fucking explain to her what limoncello is.
Get the fuck out of here.
and that's the nausea. That just shows you how much this movie lacks in details, and it's so vapid too, and it's a damn shame too for Toni Collette. I understand money's tight these days, and you got to take what you can get to. But she has been wildly successful when it comes to these movies that show her range, like Little Miss Sunshine, Hereditary. Hell, from this same director, she did Miss You Already, which is a very underrated dramedy with Drew Barrymore and Toni Collette about Drew Barrymore dying of cancer and their best friends. And it's the same director. And for this thing to come out, it was an abomination. It was a bomb in theaters, deservedly. This thing flat out sucks. It really feels like Toni Collette forget Searching for Italy. It's like she watched an Adam Sandler movie and she was like, man, you could put my house next to a US Cellular, a Verizon, and an AT&T, and I would not be as phoned in as I would be in this movie. Mafia Mama is number 3 for my worst movies of 2023. Was fixing on being number 1 for a hot minute there too.
It sounds like it would be a number 1 pick, honestly. Even the trailers made it look like that's gonna be shit. Like, I mean, like my mom wanted to go see it, and she saw it with her man. Thank God, because I did not want to waste time with that fucking movie.
What a rotten date night. What a rotten date night. That's all I'll say. Your turn, Dom.
All right, my number 3 is Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantum Mania. Now, if you're, first of all, let me just say, if you're thinking, Dom, why are you not mentioning the other films here? It's because these gentlemen watch more movies than me. So Mafia Mama's not going to make my list just because I didn't watch it. Although that probably would be number one compared to my, I'd be at softer list. But yes, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I think we've reached peak Marvel here, which, well, we probably did that like 5-6 years ago, but we're really on the downward trend of everything, and it's really just from what this is. Honestly, it's going to be more of a review of the MCU because, yeah, it's a continuing indictment of oversaturation, lack of foresight, banking on the wrong things as opposed to a solid story, trying to put everything into identity politics, which ultimately all you're doing by doing that is just hurting the very identities and minorities that you're claiming to support by trying to capitalize on it. But regardless of all that, as for the movie itself, it's all right, but it's hard to really take these movies one at a time unless you're doing something with it, like Guardians. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which made my honorable mentions for top 5. So it's not like this whole thing is without merit, or I'm going to dismiss every single superhero movie out of pocket. But this is the movie that you think of when people say they have a problem with the MCU or superhero movies in general.
Absolutely.
This is textbook what it is. It's the plot points are messy. The family ties are kind of vapid and doesn't really hold all too much weight.
Tonal issues are all over the place.
Yeah. And the one bright spot of this whole movie recently got charged with assault and battery, which I'm not going to hold it necessarily against the movie because that is his own personal Jonathan Majors' own personal failings. But damn, dude, it's like we really can't enjoy this movie in any what shape, way, or form. Now, let me say this because I do have some friends who did watch this. They also watched The Marvels. I didn't watch The Marvels. I actually feel like I would enjoy that more compared to Quantumania.
It's way better. It's not amazing
I'll believe
at all,
that.
but it's a way better movie.
I believe that. But still, and if you liked this movie, I can't really hold that against you, but it does make me think that you don't watch that many movies. And that's coming from someone who doesn't watch too many movies. I'm watching more because of these gentlemen. This is me talking down to you. I'm sorry. I am absolutely talking down to you. If you enjoy Marvel movies, great, do it, because start of the year, health insurance reboots. I'm back to like $6,000 in deductible. I had to freak out about that again like 2 hours ago. I get it. Enjoy your Marvel movies. Enjoy them. What I'm also saying, though, is that you can ask for more. So don't hedge your bets on Marvel. You don't need to defend it. You can be like, yeah, I did kind of like the scene where Cassie Lang did this thing, and that was kind of epic. Enjoy your moments. Awesome. That's great. I also hope that you can kind of engage a little bit and recognize that this is a very below mid movie. And in the wider context of the MCU and the landscape of cinema where we are today, it's in my top, it's in my bottom 3, my 5, number 3 worst bottoms of the year.
That was really well said. That was really well said all around too. I think Marvel's been around enough now that we can expect more from them than Quantumania for sure.
We could have done that. We were doing that like 15 years ago.
Quantumania was basically confirmation for me that, like, I didn't say it at the time, but I said it after Guardians 3. I was like, yeah, after Guardians 3, I think I'm good. I think I'm good here.
That to me, I mean, maybe I'll check out the next big Avengers movie with my
Deadpool
Regal
3.
Cinemas thing with my subscription. But like,
I'll see that.
Yeah.
To me, in my heart, Guardians 3 will kind of be like, because it was its own conclusion.
Yeah.
With its own internal thing. But like, if this is the last thing I watch, it would be all right. And I'm not interested in Captain America. I'm not interested in Deadpool. The return of Wolverine, of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. I'm like, bro, can we just let him die? Can maybe a cameo, but don't bring him back. I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna go into a whole Marvel rant.
Oh no,
Let's
you're
let's
good.
move on.
Because I'm about to go into a whole Marvel rant.
There you go.
No. I'm kidding. That will show up later on my list. But no, Dom. I mean, I mostly agree because I'm not. It's to spoil it. It's in my dishonorable mentions. It's number 6.
Yeah.
I agree with everything you said. This was like I'm gonna keep it light and brief here. This was like a wake up call to Marvel because all the documents and shit that came out from that retreat they went on to talk about like shares and everything at that meeting. This was the movie that was referenced a ton, mostly because they had Jonathan Majors in it. It bombed significantly hard. And just a lot of people just did not like this movie, man. I mean, if you liked it, like Dom said, that's okay. Like, I'm not even gonna say you don't watch that many movies. I understand if people liked it. Like, it has the comedy that these people like, have been eating up for years. It's just for me, it was like, man, there was no story to this. There was no stakes. I didn't feel anything there. And it was a CGI fucking mess too, man. Oh my god. I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping that like, they turn around because shit, I mean, if they're pumping out as many movies as they are, which they're not going to this year, Deadpool 3 is the only one. Thank God. But if they go back to that, then I'm hoping they're to the quality that we got with like No Way Home, fucking all those kind of movies that we enjoyed. Guardians 3 even. That was a great conclusion. Anyway, speaking of 3, my number 3 pick is Murder Mystery 2 on Netflix, directed by Jeremy Gerlich. It's on Netflix, but so is that first one. I actually think that first one is a way better movie than this fucking one. I actually like Murder Mystery 1. I think that film is fun. It's got some good jokes in there, and it's in and out, done. There's something about Murder Mystery 2, and maybe it's because it has the sequelitis trope going for it, but it feels like it's hitting all the notes of a sequel that I hate to see, and it's just dragging its feet. I had to go back and watch like scenes of this movie because it's like I kind of forgot stuff in this. Like Mark Strong is in the movie as definitely going to be the villain later, and everything. It's just like, okay, like I see where you're going with this. Not only that, but again, Steve, you just said this. Remember when Adam Sandler said that this is just like an excuse to go on vacations with him and his friends? Well, here it is again because they go everywhere in this movie, from the Jamaican islands or Bahamas, wherever that was, to India, to Paris. They go everywhere, and it's just, it doesn't feel like they're trying really to do anything here. There was only really 2 jokes in this movie I remember that made me actually laugh. And they made me laugh because they reminded me of Steve. Because Adam Sandler's character in this movie has reactions that just remind me of Steve's one-liners that he'll say. Like, for instance, there's a whole gag in this movie when someone sneaks they come into Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston's room, and they each have to hide into a closet because another person's coming into the room, and they're like, oh, they can't find out that I'm here. And each time someone enters the room, Adam Sandler puts a bunch of shit in front of the door to block people from coming in. And every single time, Adam Sandler goes, so what, I gotta move this shit again? It's just like, reaction, the tone it was said reminds me of Steve. So I don't even know if that was a really funny joke. It just reminded me of you. So take that as a compliment, if you will. It
was one of the only scenes I laughed at in that movie, too.
Everything else about this movie, I mean, it is like what I've been saying. It's just run of the mill. I don't really remember this movie that well either. It's just run of the mill Adam Sandler movies. And even though he said, like, if I don't win an Oscar for winning Uncut Gems, I will make the worst movie any of you critics have ever seen, I still don't think this is one of them, because I've seen worse Adam Sandler movies and I know how low he can go. But as of now, my number 3 is Murder Mystery 2.
That is an honorable mention on my list, so it's technically number 11 on my worst films of the year list. It didn't make my cut, but no, that thing really sucked. That thing really sucked. And this year was a pretty decent year for Adam Sandler, all things considered.
Yeah.
Between Leo and then the movie he made for his daughters, You're So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah.
I forgot that was this year. I thought that was last year, and I actually enjoyed that movie.
That was very enjoyable. Yeah, and then Leo, I think, is just a gem.
Yeah.
I think it's just a real gem that I think is going to have a lot of staying power there, too. But I think that's hilarious that you thought his character, like some of his characters' reactions reminded me, some of the sayings. I don't think he was as good as the sayings, too. One of the recent sayings that I learned, and it's probably a little bit, this is so irrelevant, but it was it's probably a little bit more cute than when I say since Christ lost his sandals. But I learned another saying when I was watching a show a few days ago and stuff. It's like, he says, "Oh, this has been going on since when Moses wore short pants." And I'm like, done, taking that one, making a mental note of that one. That one's gonna come out in conversation one of these days too. But moving forward, we're down to our final two picks over here. So without further ado, my number 2 worst film of 2023 is Camp Hideout. Speaking of Moses, this is a religious movie.
Oh boy.
There had to be one of them on this list. So January and August used to be like seen as the 2 times of the year when movie theaters became like the dumping ground for movies for which studios have little faith. But an interesting thing happened this like fall. And another one of these movies is on my list too. They're not really related. They're not, they're not in the same universe or anything, but they're similar in style. There were a lot of like late summer, early fall releases this year of movies that came and went, had no marketing budget behind them, and just appeared in theaters and then disappeared as quickly as they entered. Another movie in this wheelhouse was the Nicolas Cage movie, The Retirement Plan. And the only thing that I can think of is why this is happening is these are movies that even with the the decisively high quality standards of Netflix and everything, they couldn't get a streaming release of any kind. And because sending a movie to theaters nowadays is cheaper than ever, they can release these movies into theaters with very little cost, recoup whatever money they manage to do, mostly from people like me who are just curious and want to go to the theater and make use of their AMC Stubs plan. And then you get shit like Camp Hideout here, which is just, it reminded me, it's very similar to my number 1 worst movie of last year, which was another Christian comedy called Family Camp. Now, this movie's not as Christy and as overly religious as Family Camp was. It's from the director Sean Olsen, who made such gems as The Dog Who Saved Christmas Vacation and Squeaky Clean Mysteries Hazardous Duty. So this is what we're looking at in terms of cinematic wheelhouse right over here too. The most noteworthy thing about this movie is that it stars a very adult, a very cut, he lost the fro, stars a very adult looking Corbin Bleu from High School Musical. And he plays a camp counselor. And this movie is essentially set at this place called Camp Deer Run. And it's basically a Bible camp in so many words. They sing like these light acoustic songs about Bible teachings and everything. There's the usual summer camp shenanigans and things like that. And then there's the one troublemaking kid who has to go here because he's a delinquent and he's got nowhere else to go and his parents don't like him. Then he befriends this girl. He's still in some trouble with the law and everything, so he's kind of hiding out at this camp as well. This feels like more fit to be on a Christian cable network as opposed to 800 theaters. It would be a bad movie regardless of where it premiered, but this thing, even where children's entertainment is now, this thing should have been left on the cutting room floor. There's something about summer camp comedies that I don't know why, but they just suck. There's something about these summer camp comedies that suck. I can talk Daddy Day Camp. I can talk Family Camp, Camp Nowhere, Bushwhacked with Daniel Stern, this thing. They're the same movies being regurgitated over and over again. They go to this camp. Somebody's going to fall down a mudslide or something like that. Somebody's going to get in trouble. In the case of Camp Hideout, Christopher Lloyd just randomly friggin' appears out of nowhere for certain scenes. What's up, Joe?
I didn't mean for the camera thing to change there. Is somebody afraid to climb a rock wall?
I don't think so.
Damn it! I would have had a bingo. Fuck.
I don't think so. That's a good cliche though that you bring up though. That's a really good one.
Does somebody tip over on a rowboat or something similar?
Yeah, there's a couple water gags
in
this thing.
Right,
there are a couple water gags in this thing. There's also, the last thing I'll say is that there's no context afforded to any of these characters or so. The lead kid, who's this bad boy, there's never really developed what happened to his parents or why he decided to adopt this like life of petty crime too. And then the final 30 minutes of this movie involves the campers banding together to rig traps, like Home Alone Kevin McAllister style, for the these two goons that are chasing the bad kid Noah around. These kids are all these good-natured, squeaky clean kids. Why the fuck don't they call the cops? For the last, 30 minutes of this thing, watching them, why don't they call the damn cops? These kids are soft as white men can't jump over here. And they're not going to call the cops. Like, no, this thing is terrible. And it's not even as good as like even middling campground comedies like Bushwhacked. It's just a lot of cliche characters. And the funniest part about this movie too is it spends so much time in the beginning like showing this heist that this kid pulls off with these goons, and he's like 16 years old, pulls off this heist or whatever. They steal a bunch of goods. Then it does a lot of this stuff about like rigging traps, Home Alone style, and then it brings it back around with a couple of Bible verses too, which is as hokey as can be. This What's funny is there were not a lot of religious movies released this year. There really wasn't. It's been an abnormally quiet 2 years for Pure Flix or Pinnacle Peak, whatever they're going by now. It's been a really quiet time for contemporary Christian cinema, but there was one shitty movie at least released this year in that realm. The other was a shitty Christian multiverse movie. I'll get to that in a few minutes. But Camp Hideout, though, is number 2 on my worst films of 2023.
All right. No, you'll get to it. You'll get to it.
I'll highlight it.
You piqued my interest, sir.
You want to give your second before we cut to break?
Hell yeah, let's do it.
You know what? Yes, my number 2 is going to be Murder Mystery 2. Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit? They didn't give a shit. Why should you give a shit?
Jeremy Garlick. Where to watch? Who cares?
Who cares? And here's the thing.
Shrug.
Here's exactly how this dialogue goes. Adam Sandler's lazy. His movies suck. They consistently suck. Yeah, but he just does it to hang out with his friends. He's kind of like taking advantage of the studio's money. Okay, cool. I'm gonna still like call it one of the worst films of the year. I'm still gonna do that. Like, good for him. Good for him. He made the movie. He got to hang out with he got to hang out with his friends on vacation and then also make a movie. We're gonna judge the movie on its merits, which hardly has any. And who am I to talk shit about Adam Sandler? Because he's the one making millions and he's seeing the world. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here not doing any of that. So
Tom,
it's a mutual understanding between Adam Sandler and all of us nerds. We give him the shit. He takes it. Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit? That's it. That's it. I'm not even going to mention anything about the movie because there's really nothing of note. Really nothing at all. If you enjoy this movie, you're a boomer. You're a effing boomer. And if I know I keep saying I'm done, but like, okay, final thing. You're a boomer, and if Adam Sandler and Jennifer Aniston give you peace as you slowly release from this world, as the debts pile on, as your children stop talking to you, may they give you peace.
Well said. Well said. It's no spoiler that most of Adam Sandler's Netflix movies have really sucked and have been really some of his worst movies, which is also saying something. Murder Mystery, I remember I like the do-over with David Spade a little bit more than most people did, but I wasn't looking forward to the two-over or the do-over 2, whatever you want to call it. Not that they made it, but I was like, I don't need a sequel to this. Murder Mystery felt like the first Adam Sandler movie on which something of a foundation could have been built. Like it came out not too long. It came out, I think, 2 years after, or a year and a half after Murder in the Orient Express. And I think it came out just before Death on the Nile came out, maybe about a year beforehand. So it was right in that time when it felt like murder mysteries and their attractiveness were kind of making a comeback. And that sort of satirical bite that Sandler offers could do something with it. Murder Mystery is not a bad movie, and him and Jennifer Aniston have palpable chemistry, but they made the worst possible sequel that they could have made with Murder Mystery too.
Absolutely, yeah.
We will head to break right now then too. So we're 2 Zoom-sponsored intermissions already, and I feel like they're coming quicker. We've only been on an hour.
Yeah,
We've only been on an hour over here. I feel like they're coming on a lot faster now.
That's weird.
I don't know what that is. Either way, We'll be back in about 60 to 90 seconds. Joe's got to give his number 2 pick for worst film of the year. And we're rounding it all out with the worst movie of 2023 from each of our perspectives. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a few minutes right here on Sleepless with Steve. Back and better than ever, Sleepless with Steve. After Zoom sponsored intermission number 2, we are tackling the worst movies of 2023. I just gave my number 2 pick in Camp Hideout. Dom's number 2 was Murder Mystery 2, and now we eagerly await Joe for his second worst film of 2023. What you got, Joe?
Well, my number 2 is a film we didn't review on Sleepless, and thank God we didn't, because if you guys had to watch this, it probably would have shown up at the list at some point. But my number 2 is also available on Netflix. And it's the return of a legendary director that some people love. Rebel Moon, directed by Zack Snyder, available on Netflix. Look, man, I'm gonna say this, and I'll make this part. I was gonna make this preface when I got to number 1. All these movies I think are bad that I've said so far, and we'll get to in my 6 through 10 and dishonorable mentions and whatnot. I don't really hate them, but like they're just bad movies. Rebel Moon, like, it's so weird because I walked out of Zack Snyder's movies sometimes and I've been like, oh my god, that was so terrible. Like, I hated that. Like, Batman vs. Superman, hated that. Sucker Punch, hated that. This has all the Snyderisms, but I didn't hate it. But it is just plain out bad and boring. Let me break down to you what this movie is. This movie is Seven Samurai mashed up with Star Wars, which is basically just Seven Samurai and Star Wars already, because Star Wars was based on Seven Samurai and a lot of those movies and whatnot. Yeah. But this is flat out Seven Samurai. This movie is about a village seeking out 7 mercenaries to defend their village from space Nazis. Literally just space Nazis. They have literally like the trench coats, the same icon. They have the same color scheme that you can see in any World War II film. Like, straight up, go watch Inglourious Bastards. You'll see the same costumes you see in Rebel Moon. They're in search of 7 mercenaries, all with unique talents, to defend their village from the space Nazis, aka not the Empire. I forgot what they're called even in the movie too. For those of you who don't know, by the way, this was supposed to be a Star Wars movie that Zack Snyder pitched to Lucasfilm before Disney bought it, and it was denied. And then I think he pitched it again when Disney did buy it, and it was denied again. So it got denied twice, and then it was supposed to be a video game, but Zack decided to make it a movie once Netflix got in touch with him. And the key word there is video game, because this movie feels like a video game. All that happens in this movie is Sofia Boutella from Kingsman and the Mummy remake with Tom Cruise. Her name is Cora, and she goes on this adventure to each planet, goes there, is about to be killed by something, and then one of the mercenary characters that she's going to recruit shows up, saves her. They get an action sequence, little backstory, on to the next planet. They go to that planet, action sequence, little backstory to this character that got introduced into this action sequence, next planet. It's so weird that, like, there's a point where, like, they go to this, like, they're like, oh, I know someone that can help. And it's just like, they go to this planet and they take this elevator ride down to talk with this samurai woman who's fighting a giant spider, and they're using lightsabers or discount lightsabers, and it's just like, okay, Jesus Christ, man, is this what the whole movie is? I shit you not, that's what the whole movie is. They just go from planet to planet, trying to world build, really world building here, like, more than anything else. No substance, all style, complete opposite of Poor Things, which I mentioned last week was my number 1 movie. It is just rinse and repeat. It's a boring ass movie. It's called Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire. There's 3 parts of this, and all I have to say is this. Who the fuck is the Child of Fire? By the end of this movie, they defeat the big bad, so who the hell's coming in Part 2? And what's in danger in Part 2? And number 3, Netflix, why the hell is there going to be a director's cut of this movie? Why not just have that be the first cut that was going out? You're Netflix. You gave Martin Scorsese 3.5 hours to tell his goddamn movie. You didn't have to have Zack Snyder do a PG-13 cut of Army of the Dead. He got to tell his movie there. Why the hell was it done like this? When I was watching the interviews for this to, like, get more research on this and the production, and when the cast members are even saying to the camera, oh no, but the director's cut's actually the way better version of this movie. It's actually like the superior version. I said, why are we watching this version then? Why did I waste 2 hours of this? So, yeah, there you go. My number 2, Rebel Moon. Oh, well, I almost ruined my number 1 pick there by switching over to the
Wow.
screen. Yeah, my number 2, Rebel Moon.
Are we solidly like Snyder hater? No, not haters, but just like well deserved. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't be a director.
You say that, but it's like I liked Army of the Dead. I had fun with Army of the Dead.
That was a surprise.
Like I actually enjoyed that movie. I like 300. I like Watchmen. I like his animated movie Legends of Ga'Hoole or whatever, the owl one. That movie is awesome. But I mean, dude, okay, if you want to talk about batting averages, because we were talking about David Gordon Green, when David Gordon Green goes up to bat, I'm like, all right, he might hit something here, and it might get it out of the park. When Zack Snyder goes up to bat, I'm like, shit. I'm like, oh no, we're gonna strike out on this one. And he might surprise me. He might hit a dinger. I don't know.
Okay.
Did you know that
I will
Rebel
give
Moon? Sorry to interrupt. Did you know that Rebel Moon and Army of the Dead belong to the same universe?
I did know that. Yeah.
I just saw that they belong to a shared universe
Yeah.
where the characters from the Development Hell series Army of the Dead Las Vegas go through a portal into another dimension, and there
Yep.
are characters in that other dimension. I
Yeah.
just read that.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
read that. Had to share.
I also read that like recently because of this movie coming out. There is the Army of the Dead is actually a time loop movie. Like they did do that already. They did do the heist and everything, and there's like clues of that throughout the movie. Here's the thing. I don't care. It was a fun zombie movie.
It really was. It really was. It was a surprise for all of us when we reviewed that and Army of Thieves too.
Yeah.
Which I know Snyder didn't direct, but
He produced it and everything. Like, he had his hands on it in some way. But that was like a big surprise as well. But yeah, my number 2, Rebel Moon.
I will give kudos to Snyder. This was years ago, I think, or maybe recently. I don't remember. But Snyder recently went on a podcast.
Oh, Geeks and Gamers.
Of a admittedly right wing nerd podcast, film podcast, et cetera, and he kind of shut them down.
Yeah.
Because and they're very much they're very the misogynist type, the very social anti SJW type, and he went on there and was like, yeah, hey, just so everyone knows, I'm making an appearance on Geeks and Gamers, but I am not affiliated with Geeks and Gamers. And he took the wind out of their sails.
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful to see.
He's
I'm
like,
yeah.
He literally came on their platform just to say, I'm not affiliated with them. I don't think they're a good like organization, and I don't like what they say. Bye, and then left. It's just like, that's fucking funny.
Pro gamer move will forever have my respect in that sense. So good for you. Maybe you should have stuck as a cinematographer, but hey, you know what? Thank you for that. As a result, I didn't watch
Rebel Moon.
Rebel Moon because it probably would have made my worst bottoms.
Yeah, it probably would have. Let's do our 6 through 10 dishonorable mentions, and then we can get to our number 1.
good idea. I'll go first here. I'll try and be quick here
Go ahead.
because my list available at stevepulaski.com. Number 6 for me is another movie similar to Camp Hideout and also The Retirement Plan, one of these movies that had no promotion whatsoever, just appeared in theaters. It's called Back on the Strip. It is a male stripper comedy and a Z grade one. I'll add it that. It's got a shockingly strong cast. Wesley Snipes is in it. Surprisingly enough, Faison Love, who I do secretly like a lot. Tiffany Haddish is in this movie too, and Gary Owen. There's a lot of bad comedy in this thing too. Not worth talking about. Not worth mentioning. It was a very lonely Friday night at the theater for the only 8:30 p.m. showing of that movie too. Then there was number 7 is The Shift. This was the Christian multiverse movie I teased earlier. This is another product of Angel Studios, the same studio that released Sound of Freedom earlier this year. This movie is a faith-based science fiction thriller. And essentially, I mean, first things first, I guess multiverses are part of the Christian doctrine. I guess the two can coexist. I never knew that. This thing is much more interesting to talk about in broad terms than it is to sit through. This thing is nearly 2 hours long. It is completely and utterly convoluted. It has to deal with shifting individuals to completely different universes. And this man who is at like this pivotal point in his life comes to face with basically this guy called the Benefactor, who acts as the devil and tries to get him to become one of these shifters to shift people into different realities. It is internally lousy. And it doesn't give us any reason to sympathize with the main character whatsoever. It's number 7 on my list. Sweetwater is number 8. It's a comatose biopic about one of the first black NBA players, which is a goddamn shame because the story of Nat Clifton is really fascinating if you've ever read it. This is directed by the same guy that made the 9/11 movie with Charlie Sheen and Whoopi
Oh
Goldberg.
my god.
And this thing is, it was apparently his passion project for like 12 plus years. And most of the passion must have been reserved for boardrooms and pitch meetings because little of it shows up in the final movie. And if not for Sweetwater, White Men Can't Jump would be the worst basketball movie of the year. Sweetwater in terms of the basketball filmography of this thing is dreadful, absolutely dreadful. I think that came out the same week as Mafia Mama and Renfield 2. It was not a good weekend at the movies that weekend. And then number 9 is Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. And we're going to be getting a lot of these movies. One of them still has yet to be good. This is another one of those movies that's based off of a property that recently entered the public domain, like Winnie the Pooh. Yeah. And they're turning them into like these dark, twisted fantasies. We've already got a sequel to Blood and Honey lined up. We had the Grinch movie called The Mean One, which was better than Blood and Honey, but not by much. We got a Peter Pan one coming. We got a Blood and Honey sequel coming. Steamboat Willie is coming as well. This thing is a slog even at 83 minutes long. It is really underscored by terribly faceless characters, some lifeless kills too, and a lot of dark cinematography. Very bad movie, Blood and Honey. And then number 10, sorry, Joe, Fast X, or Fast 10 Your Seatbelts, clocks in at number 10 for my worst movies of the year. This thing really, and I mean really, sucks the life out of the franchise completely too. And after F9 left me very cold, I didn't have the highest hopes for this, but not even the car scenes could save this thing from being a train wreck. We did a long Sleepless episode on that movie. That's how bad that thing sucked. Fast X is my number 10, and that rounds out my bottom 10 for worst films of 2023. What you got, Dom?
So just doing the mentions before one.
6 to 10.
Yeah, so they are Flamin' Hot. I don't really have them numbered past 5 because this was actually a good year for new movies. More good than bad. So Flamin' Hot, actually a solid movie from debut from Eva Longoria, but on its merits, it just kind of falls flat with kind of its story and with the truth of it. I read a little bit more into the Flamin' Hot story, the actual story. I'm like, okay, hold on. You're kind of undermining the message here. Or you kind of built up a myth here that's not very good. So we're gonna let that one gestate and kind of fall apart on its own in terms of its story. Killers of the Flower Moon, great performance here by De Niro and Gladstone. DiCaprio kind of underutilized. I don't want to say phoning it in, but just kind of like what's going on here. And it's Martin Scorsese's kind of wafting around. Martin Scorsese's career at this stage really is in parallel with John Williams, the composer, where he's getting nominated for everything he's doing, but really it's only because we feel like he's going to die any moment now. They're going to kick the bucket soon. So we got to give him some legacy awards here. Got to throw him a bone here. But really, if you hold up Killers of the Flower Moon, especially to Scorsese's other movies, it really falls flat. And it really is a shame because what the story here deserves is so much more, which he was doing in like the last 5 minutes with that stage play, that radio play thing. But it's like, bro, you got to do the work beforehand and actually make not a coherent movie, but a really cohesive movie here as a result. And the worst of this 3 is going to be Indiana Jones. Would have made my bottom 5. However, it's something about the core formula of an Indiana Jones movie is so crystal, is so diamond rock hard and so solid that it did save itself from the bottom 5. But yeah, man, I think it might be the worst of the lot. I don't know. I still kind of don't like Temple of Doom. I really don't like Temple of Doom, but with Dial of Destiny, it did have some moments that made me go, all right, fine, sure. I hope this is Ford's last outing as Jones. Please hang up the hat, give it to someone, or not at all. Just stop doing it. But who knows? So, yep.
I wasn't here to review that, but I will say this: it's my least favorite Indiana Jones movies, but I still had fun with it. But I do think it is the weakest of them all.
Yeah, man.
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
All right, for mine, I'll do my 10 through 6 real quick. Number 10 is Ghosted with Chris Evans and Ana de Armas. Sorry, Ana, you're gorgeous, but you're not good. Your looks can't save this movie. Same with you, Chris. You're a handsome man, but nah, man. This is like just straight up the most laziest comedy of the year, basically. Well, actually, no, hold on. There is a lazier comedy I'm gonna talk about in just a second. But yeah, Ghosted was just like, hey, like, let's just get some friends and make a movie almost. It wasn't at that Adam Sandler thing because there was some production at least put into this. And I don't know, maybe because I got to look at Ana de Armas. I'm sorry, but like maybe that's why it's at number 10. So, number 9 is 80 for Brady. Not necessarily, like I said, a bad movie.
Oh, wow.
Like, Dom's like, wait, hold on a minute, I gotta reformat my list.
Yep.
I had fun at moments with this movie, but again, it was just kind of like by the numbers movie. And like what Steve said, not enough movies are made for the demographic that Steve kept mentioning, like, you know, the older audience and everything. And this could have been another one of those. I would say this one's probably more successful than Mafia Mama, because at least the trailer did make me chuckle, and I did get a few chuckles out of this movie. So this movie, it definitely, especially with this cast, I think at least is a bit more, I would say actually a lot more better than something like Mafia Mama. Definitely more in the right direction. Now here's like the stuff that I actually consider bad. Number 8, The Family Plan with Mark Wahlberg. This was the comedy that I think was the worst of the year. It's on Apple TV Plus. Really big surprise that Apple TV was the one to put this out, because I thought this was on Netflix, and I spent like 20 minutes trying to find it. Like, no, I know it came out today. What the hell is this thing? But no, it actually turned out it was on Apple TV, which I'm surprised this was the movie they chose. It's a Mark Wahlberg comedy. He talks like this the whole time. He gives a bunch of questions, and he doesn't know what he's doing most of the time. He's like, yeah, I'm an assassin, babe, but, you know, I'm on the run, and now we have to get going. My son's a gamer. He's going to meet a popular YouTuber, and he's going to participate in the Valorant tournament.
That's really good.
Thanks.
That's a really good impression.
Like, so it's a by the numbers Mark Wahlberg family comedy. Not as good as that other family comedy that I can't think of. Steve, back me up on this. I know you like this movie too. It actually came out. All in the Family, I think, or something. Maybe not All in the Family. That's a comedy show, I think, from like the 60s. Oh my god. I'm spending way much more time than I want to on this.
You thinking of are you Instant Family?
Instant Family, yeah. Which I actually thought was not that bad. Maybe that's somebody else. Oh yeah, no, that's Mark Wahlberg. Yeah,
That's Mark Wahlberg. Yeah, that's a good movie.
That's a good movie. Really good movie. This complete opposite of a movie. This is a bad movie. Number 7, Quantumania. I'm not gonna go further into that. It was a bad movie. And then number 6, Expendables 4. Holy shit, like, what a terrible outing for all these people, man. Like, I should have known this was going to be that. I thought this was going to be a return to form, it being rated R, because I had fun with those first 2 movies. And I was like, you know what, man? I'm so down for another Expendables movie to watch these guys just do what they do best, just shoot shit and make one-liners. The entire cast but Jason Statham gets locked in a room for about an hour of this movie. And it's basically just a Jason Statham solo adventure throughout most of it. Also, I don't mean to spoil the whole movie, but Stallone dies in like the first act, and then comes back in the last 5 minutes because he's like, "Oh, I faked my death," and I'm like, "Get the fuck out of here!" All right, but yeah, those are my 10 through 6. Dishonorable mentions, Skinamarink. It's not a bad movie. It's just, hey man, look. The longer I think about that movie, the more I'm like, you know what? The short film it was based on 20 times better. There was no reason to make this as long as it was, or even a feature film. I'm interested to see what that director does next. Atmosphere-wise, that's great. But looking back on it now, it's like, you know what? It just wasn't made to be a film. Transformers Rise of the Beast. Other than the G.I. Joe reveal at the end that they're going to be in the same universe, nothing about this movie really entertained me. There's some cool performances from Anthony Ramos. I like the first 30 minutes of this movie and what they did with the 90s setting. But other than that, though, it's like the most by-the-numbers Transformers movie, but at least not being down by the Michael Bay stuff. And then finally, The Machine. Just an okay comedy. Wanted something more, though, from that comedian as well.
Bert Kreischer.
Yes, thank you.
Bert Kreischer. All right, I guess we go on to our number ones then. You ready, gentlemen?
Yep.
Let's do it.
All right, my number 1 worst film of 2023 is Zoe 102. Now,
That's
some
right.
might argue that my subsequent additions on my list at stevepulaski.com and what I just gave here are worse than Zoe 102. But my undying love for Zoe 101, along with my emotional investment of it during its initial run, made Zoe 102 sting and suck even harder. This is like watching people that you knew in high school who are keenly aware that they peaked in high school and are so stuck in their ways that they know no other path forward. This is the line that I used in my review, and it really begs to be reiterated. Zoe 102 makes the iCarly reboot look like Drake and Josh. And Zoe 101, I don't have to go too long-winded in this, but it was a cut above other Nickelodeon shows of its era. Unlike most Dan Schneider properties, it was one of the only without a laugh track. It was shot on location in Malibu, and it's still to date one of the most expensive productions for the network. With Zoe 102, though, it's all about the antics, most of which not funny. It's a reunion when 3 or 4 of the cast members didn't come back, openly mocked this movie, which is completely understandable. It picks up more than 10 years after Zoe, played by Jamie Lynn Spears, Quinn, Aaron Sanders, Logan, Matthew Underwood, after they've graduated from Pacific Coast Academy. Zoe is 32, painfully single, trying to work as a television producer for a crappy reality series. Quinn is getting married now, and complicating matters is really Zoe's relationship with Chase, played by Sean Flynn. And I joked even in my review, I said, you'll remember Chase Matthews as the poster child of being in the friend zone before the term was even mainstream. Zoe and Chase in this movie, it picks up where they haven't spoken in years, but Zoe knows that she can't show up to Quinn's wedding looking like the early 30s loser that she is. So en route, then, doing the completely logical thing, she hires an actor to portray her Australian boyfriend, borrows a coworker's self-driving car, and tries to handle her wedding and work duties all in the same evening. This is a cartoon. This is a shitty cartoon of a movie, too. And with this thing, though, it doesn't reignite any chemistry amongst the cast. There's a lot of unfamiliar faces here, so there's a lot of new characters and subplots and antics thrown into the mix, too. It's the reality show that Zoe works on in this movie is a complete trash TV farce. Thomas Lennon makes an appearance from Reno 911. He plays Zoe's vindictive and obnoxious and angry boss. And admittedly, nobody's going to want to give Dan Schneider a modicum of publicity for very good reason. But Zoe 102 definitely suffers from his absence completely. There's no character work here that's really done. There's predictably, like a lot of legacy crap, a lot of callbacks to the show itself. And ultimately, though, you just have a lot of unfunny, dreadful new characters in this thing. And on top of it all, it's like an hour and 45 minutes long. Feels every bit as long. It's pathetic. There was another movie released this year that was a legacy sequel to a long-standing Nickelodeon property. It was called Good Burger 2. Good Burger 2 had a marathon of cameos in it. It was not a great movie. But Good Burger 2 somehow retained the heart of the original skits and the movie because of the lasting bond between Keenan and Kel that was shown on screen. Everybody here feels like they're at a crossroads with their entertainment career and had to do this thing for monetary reasons. And it shows up as heartless as can be in Zoe 102. I would have rather had a Zoom call with all of the actors reminiscing about the glory days than to watch this thing. Zoe 102, worst movie for me of 2023.
I did not watch it, but I believe it.
I know
It's
that was a very personal one, Steve, and I'm sorry.
That one hit me between the eyes. That one hit me between the eyes. And you could say it was my fault for expecting a lot. I was expecting at least a little bit more than this. I was generally pretty kind of Good Burger too. And I even had expectations for that one. Zoe 102 flat out sucks.
Mm. All right. My number one worst bottom of 2023 is, of course, Fast X. Now, earlier in the show, you may remember that I said Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, is kind of a mess. And it is the culmination of a lot of bad decisions of its franchise made until now. Fast X Part 1. I don't think any decisions were really made to begin with. Here is a movie where it feels like you are throwing darts on the really take yourself out of the moment. Astro project yourself and really think macro into what you're looking at. The easiest way to do that is to just pull up Fast X on Wikipedia and look at the cast list. Vin Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, Tyrese Gibson, Chris Ludacris Bridges, Jordana Brewster, Sung Kang, John Cena, Nathalie Emmanuel, Scott Eastwood, Daniela Melchior, Alan Rickson, Helen Mirren, Brie Larson, Rita Moreno, Jason Statham, Jason Momoa, and Charlize Theron as Cypher. Also, Gal Gadot and Dwayne Johnson reprised their roles from the franchise, uncredited as Giselle Yahar and Luke Hobbs during the final scene and mid-credit scene, respectively. None of this matters. We are here at the crossroads of the final act. This is Fast X 2. Fast X 2. Nope, that's 13. Regardless, that's 12. Regardless. This is cinema at its finest. This is American cinema at its most cinema. At its most American, actually. It's cars, it's loud explosions, and it's gunfights. But ultimately, what it is someone thinking that this is entertaining, that this is good. I mean, Justin Lin didn't, the guy who did the most with this franchise, did the most of this franchise. He didn't even come back, and they brought in the guy who did Grimsby. What are we doing here? When Rita Moreno kissed Vin Diesel on the forehead and said, "My hijo," I don't even know if that's what she did. I don't remember. I kind of fell asleep. I actually did fall asleep during this movie. I don't remember Brie Larson. I really don't. The one bright shining part of this film is Jason Momoa. And he really couldn't do much with it because I'm kind of over Momoa. I respect him. Don't get me wrong. He's a fine actor and for what he does and his shtick and, you know, his role and status in Hollywood. But he couldn't really save it all that much. And I'm kind of like over the whole Momoa craze. If you're attracted to him and maybe you went out to see him, I hope you enjoyed the movie. I hope you enjoyed this movie. I just want you to know that you can do better. Fast and Furious is the millennial Adam Sandler. I kind of made that up right now. I don't actually even know if that's applicable. I'll see what the other gentlemen say. But ultimately, I think I gave this a decent review. In retrospect, this was a mess by its own standards. I know we're at 10 minutes, so I will just say this was the absolute worst bottom of 2023 for me. So with that, I shall surrender time.
Well said. Very well said.
No, it wasn't. I got lost in the sauce in my own blind hatred of this movie.
It was bad.
Your comparison to it's Adam Sandler for millennials.
I don't know if that works.
As a Fast and Furious fan, I'm insulted. But that works so goddamn good. I'm not even gonna lie.
Do you understand what I'm saying by that?
No, I do. Because it's, God, this is gonna sound so stupid because I love these movies, but it really does feel like, like these movies are just, all right, guys, time to make another one. Let's go to this destination next and blow some shit up.
Yeah. Remember
Adam Sandler for gearheads would have probably been better.
Maybe, yeah.
Remember when remember that episode of South Park where it's like, how does Family Guy make their jokes? Oh, it's just a bunch of sea otters collecting balls of like
Yeah.
nouns and prepositions on
No.
one side, and they go, that's what it is. That's what it is. It's
Yeah.
globe-trotting explosions, and eventually you'll come out with a plot. I mean, the fact that Dominic Toretto drives a car into a rolling bomb to save the Pope. Actually, you know what?
Come on.
If
I
this
mean, like,
movie
listen to that,
had
though.
Pope Francis, if it had Pope Francis or a Pope Francis like character, it's like, oh, Pope
Nos.
Juan Rodrigo the first, just as a generic
Pope
stand-in.
Frank. Pope Frank.
Yeah, exactly. And he came out and he was doing his Pope thing, and then he saved the Pope. This actually would have been like in my top 5, but they didn't do that. Instead, he just there was just nothing. So you know what? Yeah, dude.
We kind of
Honestly,
shafted,
like reading the cast list, which I just did, but like reading it really makes you think, what the fuck are they doing here? Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
we kind of shafted Joe on time. You think you'll be able to get it in?
I'm sorry.
Do you care if we take a break and then do this and then end the show?
We can come back. We can
Okay.
come back.
Let's
It's
do
all
I
that.
good.
totally
I
stole
want-
time on that.
No,
My
dude.
No,
fault.
you're fine. No, you're fine. I think Zoom
Since we
steals
got the time
from us.
since we got the time, do you want to say anything else?
No, man. Just that. Well, yes, but just the quick thing is that this X was so bad. I'm actually intrigued as to how they're gonna wrap it up for X Part 2.
Dude, so am
That's-
I.
Yes. What
It
a
does leave
what
you
a
with the
brilliant
intrigue.
setup for Part 2. Great work, everyone.
It didn't inspire
Excellent.
apathy, clearly. It didn't inspire apathy like F9 kind of did for me.
I will say this for both of you and anyone listening who did not like this movie or even love this movie like I did in some
That's okay.
stupid way.
That's okay.
Go watch or listen to the How Did This Get Made podcast of the Fast X review. Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, the director that usually works with Seth Rogen recently on a ton of projects, they were featured on as guests. I was in fucking tears laughing my ass off at some of the shit they were bringing up throughout their review. It's so good.
Wow.
We will come back then for Joe's final film on his worst of 2023 list, his worst movie of 2023. Then we'll wrap up the show coming back after what is the third Zoom sponsored intermission. I knew it was going to be I knew it was going to be a long one tonight. We got Joe with the final word coming back in about 60 to 90 seconds right here on Sleepless with Steve. We are back, Sleepless with Steve, running long on this Wednesday evening, this second show of the year. As always, it is our worst films of 2023 we've gotten here. I've given my 5. Dom's given his 5. What remains is Joe with his number 1 worst film of 2023. I think I already know what it is. But Joe, can you concretize the worst movie you saw last year?
Yes, and I need to send you guys a photo in our chat real quick because I'm going to bring it up as a slide and I want you guys to see it. I'll tell you when to look at the photo, so don't look at it beforehand. But yes, my my number 1 pick of... Oh, wait, I can't do speaker view. Hold on. All right, there we go. I'll just have to do it like this, whatever. My number 1 pick of 2023 is The Exorcist Believer, directed by David Gordon Green, available on Peacock, but you can watch the Halloween trilogy from Green instead, and I will still stand by that is a good trilogy. And as crazy as it sounds, I like that trilogy enough to think that this was going to be another start to a solid horror trilogy. I was wrong. I was horribly, horribly wrong. As I said, these movies so far... Oh, thank you, guys. These movies so far... I get my soapbox. I mentioned on my list. I thought they were bad, but I didn't hate. I try not to really hate on movies anymore because I feel like there's a whole culture now dedicated on YouTube that is involved in just hating on stuff for the views and hating and always bringing up the negativity in any art form or media, such as video games, movies, TV shows, anything, music. I really try to reserve for stuff that I'm like, no, that is just flat out like there's nothing redeeming about that. And I hate to say it, but that is this movie for me. You might disagree. I've seen people who actually have enjoyed this movie. Dom, you had it as number 4. Steve, I don't even think you had it on your list. I think you said it was a dishonorable mention. But for me, this movie was just terrible. And why? Why is it terrible? Because I feel like it is that studio executive joke that Steve used. Hey, what if 2 girls were possessed? Studio executive. Holy shit. It was this movie. It literally was just that. There was nothing going on in this movie. It is a boring ass movie. It takes forever to get to the possession. It takes forever for the cast to realize these girls are possessed. And when finally we get around to it, when you're not bored out of your fucking mind, the movie somehow gets worse. It gets worse because they decide to bring in legacy characters. And we've gone on and on about legacy characters on this show. We've talked about how great they can be used. And, Top Gun, we talked about in 2022 at this point last year. And then we talked about how bad they could be used, like Jurassic World Dominion. Same thing at this point last year. This is a new low for me because it's like, at least in Jurassic World, those characters got to do something. Chris McNeil, played by Ellen Burstyn, had nothing to do in this movie. Now, it's great she used the role to like pay for a grant for acting students to be able to use whatever that article was. Like, she actually just used the money to do that. That's awesome. Thank you for doing that, Ellen. But to the writers, David Gordon Green, Peter Sattler, and Danny McBride. Oh, and Scott Teems. I almost forgot about him. To you guys, this is not how you do that at all. They even try to bring a whole patriarchy angle into this too, about how like, oh, and it's like, dude, let's just try to fucking tell a good story. Let's not try to like bring into like any meta-ness. I almost said wokeness, and I was like, oh boy, I'm converting. And I'm just like, my God, like, can we just focus on telling a story? Because like, there's nothing really going on here. The whole idea of it being Believer, it would have been a cool idea, like a man who lost his wife that we see throughout the events at the beginning of this movie, loses his faith, and when his daughter gets possessed, he needs to regain his faith. And it should have just stayed as that with a great actor like Leslie Odom Jr. It should have just focused on that. Only one girl, his daughter, is possessed. He needs to regain faith. He seeks help by going to Chris McNeil after reading her book and everything. And then from there, events play out. That's how this movie should have gone. Instead, we had the fucking Catholic Avengers show up, and everybody in this damn neighborhood had like beef with the devil. And it's just like, the devil was like Thanos level threat here, and everything. And what they choose to do, I forgot. This is when you're supposed to look at the photo, by the way. I texted my friend when they revealed what they did with Chris McNeil's character. I took a photo of me sitting in the theater after she goes blind, like Dom revealed and everything, and she's in a hospital for the rest of the movie. And I just told my friend, man, fuck this movie. I haven't felt that way about a movie in so long. I am so glad that Taylor Swift came out with her movie and pushed this movie up a week, because then I got to go see her awesome fucking concert and wash the fucking taste that this movie left out of my mouth, man. This movie is just a misfire, and I said this in our review. It's a misfire on just writing completely. It shows how bad, to me, when you write a movie bad, everything can fail, because I felt like costumes, cinematography, acting, they were all fine, but writing was so terrible in this movie that it just brought everything down to make me just roll my eyes in fear, just have anger the entire time of, why was this even made? Why did you guys do this? You have a trilogy planned out? What the hell are you gonna do with it? That is my number 1 pick, Exorcist the Believer.
Number 1,
Okay. I remember you giving it 1 star on Letterboxd too.
Yeah.
And you contextualized that very well. This movie pissed you off.
It really, I haven't felt that way about a movie in a while. Like, even when we revived this show, like, there's been movies like I've been like, that was just a flat out bad movie and everything. This was like, holy shit, this is probably like, of all the movies we reviewed on this show, this is the worst one by far for me. I absolutely did not like this movie at all.
Worse than Woody Woodpecker?
On this revival of the show.
On the revival show. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, gentlemen.
Kudos.
It was a great show.
It was a great show.
It was another great show, another great recap of the worst movies of a given year, this year being 2023. We're going to get back to talking about one movie as opposed to 15 or more on a show for next week. So next week, we're talking about Mean Girls. This is not a remake of the 2004 movie, which I just rewatched the other day. Me and Catherine rewatched it on Paramount Plus. And I will say to you guys, if you have the time, Dom, I know you got a week off, highly recommend going back and watching Mean Girls. Or if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it because it's a very fun movie. This isn't a remake. This is an adaptation of the Broadway musical. And so it's a lot like The Color Purple. This is an adaptation of the musical, not a remake of the original. So highly recommend at least using this as an excuse to go back and watch the Lindsay Lohan movie from 2004, which has really stood the test of time and somehow now 20 years old. So we're going to tackle that movie next week on the show. Looking forward to that. It's going to be our first 2024 movie review of the year. So very excited to talk about that. Thanks for you guys, not only for making great lists, but also making great slideshows. It's been fun to view them all the time on the show these last 2 weeks. You guys always come with your A game with these slideshows. I do mine very linearly, I guess you would say. You guys always throw some little surprise curveballs in there, and I like to highlight those as well. So kudos to you guys on your slideshow making abilities as well as your list making abilities. We'll be back next week for Mean Girls. Until then, for Dominic Guanzon, Joe Viso, and yours truly, a long, nearly 2-hour show coming to conclusion right now. It's Sleepless with Steve, live on YouTube.